This video is brought to you by Devout Decals, makers of reusable Catholic art for your home altar, your bedroom, and your home classroom. Fidua Supplicans is the story that just won't go away. The document was issued 6 months ago, give or take, and we have long since ended the phase of debating the issue, with the African bishops having made a sort of deal with Rome that they don't have to implement the document, while professing their loyalty and communion with Francis due to cultural and social situations in Africa. And for the most part, people are tired of hearing about Fidua Supplicans. We are now entering the enforcement stage. And what will enforcement look like? Well, enforcement in this case looks like any priests who make a display of not implementing the document, of refusing to give blessings to those in irregular situations or James Martin pairings, will possibly be removed from the priesthood. That's if their bishop doesn't have their back. When resisting anything from Rome, any of the heresies we see coming from apostate Rome these days, it is extraordinarily important for the bishop to be on the same side as the priests who must do their job. They're more likely to be able to get away with such resistance if the bishop is on their side. When the bishop is not on their side, extraordinary actions might be taken, perhaps even as a sign of unity with Rome on this. Remember, just because you don't hear much about a bishop does not mean that that bishop is on the side of good, that he just keeps his head down while quietly doing the work of Christ. Some bishops take that strategy as a way of waiting out Rome, waiting Francis out for a follow-up who will likely be at least a little more moderate than Francis. At least, that's the assumption. Just because a bishop is silent on such matters does not mean that he is one of those. As you're going to see here, because we now have word of a group of priests who have banded together against the wishes of their bishop and refuse to implement Fidua Supplicans. They recognize the evil that is in that document. They recognize the destruction of Catholic morality embedded in that document, that if they participate in the destruction of Catholic morality, they will have to stand accountable to our blessed Lord. And they have informed their bishop of such. And what did he do? He could have taken punitive action against them himself, but he decided to make an example of them. He called for help from Rome. He asked for an apostolic visitation from Rome, and that's what he got. Rome is now investigating the priests personally. For those who don't know what an apostolic visitation is, I will bring to your mind the story of Joseph Strickland, Bishop Emeritus of Tyler, Texas. Bishop Strickland, a year ago, was given an apostolic visitation. A few months afterwards, he was unceremoniously stripped of his episcopate and forced into early retirement as the Bishop Emeritus of Tyler, Texas. Two questionable, we'll say in charity, bishops from the American episcopate were assigned by Francis to do the visiting of his diocese. They openly talked while in front of the employees of the chancery about who the replacement for Bishop Strickland would be. Bishop Strickland's fate was sealed already. And it's why after that visitation, Bishop Strickland took a much more public, high-profile position in resisting the errors coming from Rome. He knew that his fate was sealed. And it was. In early November of last year, he was removed. And no replacement has been made for him. A neighboring bishop is governing the diocese until such a replacement can be found. That's the most obvious example. Apostolic visitations have been used to crush communities of traditional religious. The more traditional they are, the more likely they are to get an apostolic visitation to make sure there are no schismatic tendencies there. It is the preferred mechanism Rome uses for dealing with troublesome religious. And so this bishop has used this mechanism by inviting Rome to do such a visitation to quell an uprising of priests. We go for this story to Mesa and Latino for this story. With this headline, Disobedient Priests, Apostolic Visit Ordered by the Pope to Sassari. Sassari is a little-known diocese in Italy. You've never heard of it, probably, unless you are Italian. And if you are Italian, let me know in the comments more about the story, because I could find virtually no other reporting on this except from Mesa and Latino, one of the finer, lesser-known Italian or Catholic news websites being operated out of Europe. They usually focus, though, on stories about the traditional Mass and other such things, but they are the only ones publishing this. So if you are an Italian Catholic watching this, please let me know in the comments or in an email more about this story. Everybody, please pray for them. Here is the actual story. It's very short. Quote, Anti-Bergoglio priest, the Pope investigates Sassari. Cardinal Emilio sent, Saba, disobedient priests. The Archbishop against a fringe of ultra-conservatives. The Archbishop of Sassari wrote at the end of 2023 that something was wrong, calling everyone to order. Gianfranco Saba had been very clear. Quote, an even minimal, easily identifiable fringe of the clergy lives their ministry in an individualistic and self-referential form, in the open and sometimes obstinate refusal to adhere with religious obsequiousness as due and promised to the magisterium of the Church and to the norms that regulate their life and mission, creating scandal and disorientation of the people of God entrusted to their care, with attitudes and actions that undermine that unity indispensable for the work of evangelization. A new initiative has now been dedicated to the minimum identifiable fringe, arranged no less, and by Pope Francis, a reconnaissance via visit entrusted to Cardinal Orazio Emilio in the Archdiocese of Sassari, an activity conducted in the utmost confidentiality, as in the habits and practices of the Church, without scandal and without the breadth of themes and evaluations. But in fact, it is a pre-investigation to take stock of the situation of the community led by Bishop Gianfranco Saba. According to rumors, it was the Archbishop himself who asked for an apostolic visit, a sort of super parts verification to gather elements and testimony, directly from the clergy and from people informed about the facts, as one would say, in criminal investigations. In recent weeks, Cardinal Emilio went to Sassari, heard many people, and took notes of their statements. Heavy words, a harsh warning that also concerns a certainly chatter and creeping branch that does not only concern Saba's actions, but Pope Bergoglio's own line. In short, in some parishes in the Sassari area, Francis's choices are not welcome. My specific duty as pastor of this beloved portion of the people of God is to bring back to Sassari those who have moved away under the material cares of the Mater et Magistra Church. That's the Mother and Teacher Church. The minimal and easily identifiable fringe has been called to order for behaviors that are not actually ecclesial: hostility, opposition, resistance, and rigidity. The opposition can be indicated in two large areas, one of the celebration of the sacraments and the other of the management of heritage of the archdiocese. The fact is that the call was heeded, but not by all. They imposed a further ecclesiastical initiative. In some ways, in fact, a substantial nucleus of the fringe increased the intensity of the protest, and not so veiled attacks. In short, some have returned to the riverbed and others have not. Hence, again, at discretion, the apostolic visit entrusted to Cardinal Emilio is actually accompanied by a further initiative. End quote. The translation leaves something to be desired, but the gist of it is this. You had a corps of priests who refused to implement fiducia supplicans. That's what the article says before that letter. And because they were excessively rigid and excessively conservative, they were causing trouble. Because if they refused to implement it, people got wind of it. And what happened then? Their dissent fed into the laity, causing division in the Catholic community in that portion of Italy. And so the bishop attempted to call some of them back, and some of the priests submitted, but most of them did not. Hence the apostolic visitation. We don't know how many priests this is. There is, again, no other reporting on this story that I could find. It's a fascinating story, though, and one worth keeping an eye on. So again, if you are an Italian Catholic watching this, please let me know. How many priests are we talking about here? Is this enough that the Vatican couldn't laicize all of them or remove them from active ministry? That it would cripple the operations of the Archdiocese of Sassari if he did such things? Because if it is that many priests, then they need to stand their ground. That is how this has to happen. And not just in that diocese, but everywhere. The only way this evil, this rot in the church can be defeated, that we can get the Vatican to back down on such evil things, is for enough priests to stand together and say no, that the Vatican can't remove them from active ministry, that local bishops can't remove them from active ministry, because it would otherwise destroy the working operations of the diocese. So let me know if you're more aware of this story, because these priests need your prayers. So please keep them in your prayers, that they do the will of God in this situation. Curious, what do you think about this? Are you happy to see Italian priests banding together right in Francis's backyard against this great evil blessing document that still that news won't go away 6 months later? Let me know in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.